Today on Locked On Red Wings, Grand Rapids is eliminated in Game 5. What did we learn about Detroit's most promising youth?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a former broadcast producer for 97.1 The Ticket, and Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. Hey, the Tigers won a series, dude.
They got a 3-game heater now.
3-game heater. Look at that. Reese Olson finally got a win. So you got a little.
That Beerling walk-off was a fun weekend. They're going to keep wearing the City Connects. So whether people like it or not, they keep winning in them. So they're going to keep wearing them.
I don't, but if they keep winning, then I'm okay with it. Because across the road, I guess across the street's not the correct term to use. Across the street in terms of shows, but 2 hours away in Grand Rapids, it did not have the same vibes today after they fall in Game 5, blanked in Game 5.
On Sunday, not the same vibes, but Friday were pretty, by the looks of it, pretty immaculate vibes.
Yeah, it was. And so
you
normally,
were boots on the ground.
Yes, absolutely.
Who's a journalist now? Who's on the ground, baby?
And joining media scrums, asking the prospects questions, the coach question,
Like a proud dad.
Maybe we should have a Brian's a writer ticker coming across the bottom now.
There you go.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So normally when we have two games to recap, we kind of just merge them into our biggest takeaways from both games in one weekend. But these two games were so different and both had huge stakes at play. I think we're better off just going Game 4 and then Game 5. And then at the end, our takeaways from the series as a whole and our viewing experience watching the Griffins and watching the young players. So first, let's go back to Grand Rapids, Game 4, right? That's in Grand Rapids. Van Andel Arena is rocking. Scotty, you watching the game at home. I was in Grand Rapids, but you were watching it at home. A little flex there. What was your big difference maker from that one?
This is going to come to a shock, but I'm going to go with Berggren. I don't know, man. That is, for a guy who is, I don't want to say controversial, but a guy who is very talked about, right, in this fan base pretty consistently. Him having the postseason that he has had, just in like the dramatic goals that he has scored. Not that he's been like the most dominant player on the ice every game or anything like that, but just every goal he has scored has been so impactful. It's really fun to watch, and there is going to be, and we'll have the conversation on this show. There's going to be a lot of conversations surrounding Berggren and his future with the team, and whether there is a spot in this lineup card for him on the NHL side of things this fall. But as far as this postseason and Friday specifically, obviously has a flair for the dramatic.
Yeah, and I think that he proved this postseason that he is a little bit too big for the AHL at this point. And again, we've had that conversation about whether it's going to be with the Red Wings or with the Red Wings or not. He'll be in the NHL next season just because of the waiver situation that he has.
But he won't be in the A.
But he won't be in the A. And he scored 2 goals. It was originally a hat trick, but they took one of his goals away. It was actually deflected by Marco Kasper, one of those goals. And so it was 2 goals and 1 assist in Game 4. One of those was a power play goal, which was huge for the Griffins as their special teams struggled all series long. And again, into Game 5, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For him to be able to yet again step up in a big moment, right? We saw it all in Rockford. He had the game-winning goal in every single win against the Rockford IceHogs. And then here in Game 4, do or die, the last 20 minutes, he came alive, and some beautiful feeds by Carter Mazur too. Let's not diminish what Carter Mazur has done. He's definitely a notable performer in this entire series, in this entire playoffs. Carter Mazur has been consistently one of the best players on the ice, feeding Jonathan Berggren. But Berggren and his flaws are still there, right? Like, I'm not trying to pump him up too much. We know what he is. He's going to play, if he's with the Red Wings next season, it's going to be in a bottom six role, and he's going to be a Daniel Sprong type player. Offense first, power play specialist. He's going to probably hit 40 points from the bottom six, and that is a huge win. I don't want people to think that that is us downplaying the significance of that role. To have a guy who can be a half point per game player in the bottom six, I think he has that potential. I think that the deficiencies in his game is going to hold him back from being a top six forward, but he proved this postseason that he can score in big moments, in big time games. And I think that it's just time for him to be a full-time NHL player. And again, that bottom six role is just what I expect out of him. And also, side note, his personality, and he's so easy to root for as a person because he is hilarious. Yeah. I do like on a personal level, like all the stuff you see from him on social media. He's always goofing around, willing to help, do posts with the admins and do little jokes. But like in the post media scrums, he's always like lighthearted and jovial. It's really easy to root for him as well. So I hope it is with the Red Wings that he has that role. But outside of that, my difference maker for that game, if not Berggren, almost said Janssen Berggren again, Sebastian Cossa. Ever since Game 2, increasingly impressive performances from Sebastian Cossa. He stopped almost every single shot that game, just allowing 2. Let me see, make sure I pull up the right game here. So he allowed just 2 goals on 33 shots, so he made 31 saves. Fantastic performance from Sebastian Cossa, making some huge, huge saves as well. Van Andel Arena was rocking, and he was fantastic. And I asked him in the locker room after the game, I was like, after a performance like Game 2, from not just you, but the entire team, like, how do you lock back in to have increasingly impressive performances in Game 3 and 4? And he's just like, it's a mental reset. He's like, what's in the past is in the past, and you just focus on the now. And even in Game 5, which again we'll talk about, another stellar performance by him. He made 30-plus saves yet again. He just couldn't get the goal support. So Sebastian Cossa is my difference maker in that game. But there's a lot of players you could probably give that to.
Yeah, no, and I think that also, just the conversation around Cossa is heating up, which I think is exciting. I think there's a decent amount of, like pump the brakes. This dude isn't going to be here on opening night in the fall or anything. But, as we've talked about a lot, he is a guy who at some point next year, if he was to make his debut, that wouldn't shock people timeline-wise, right? Like, I don't think anyone is expecting him to get called up and be like a permanent fixture. But if he makes his NHL debut at some point next season, I think that's somewhat, I don't want to say expected, but that wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world at this point. And the reason why these games are so fun to watch is because you are looking into the future, right? Like you're looking into and trying to figure out which of these guys could really produce at the next level. And I think Cossa really did show relatively consistently, which I think is the biggest thing. Like, we know that there's flashes of greatness in there. We've seen that, but we also have seen kind of the flip side of that coin as well. And so I think that's not to say that he had, a perfect postseason or that, he was like the MVP of the team in the playoffs or anything like that. He certainly had a couple of bad games that we talked about when they happened. But I think for the most part, the thing I was the most impressed with was on a broader scale, just a little bit of consistency, like night in and night out. He was putting up similar performances outside of, a couple outliers.
In 9 games this postseason, he had 7 strong starts. Yeah. So that's what you want to see out of Sebastian Cossa, and that's really reassuring. Let's speed it up a little bit here because we had 2 games to get to. Notable performers in this game: Carter Mazur, huge, 2 assists again. His production continues to ramp up as the postseason went on, and on it he assisted on both of Jonathan Berggren's goals, I believe, and it's because I can't remember which one they then credited to Marco Kasper later on. Yeah. But he's been huge to driving the play every single time there's a goal that's scored, right? Like, you watch it, and in the Game 5, again, we'll get to that next segment, but even then, you're looking at players who can consistently create the most opportunities for themselves and their line mates, and it's always Carter Mazur. He's always getting to the puck first. He's always picking players off. He's always winning the the battles along the boards to create opportunities and drive that puck back to the net. He's getting to the net to be an option out front. That creates penalties too, because then the other team takes you out, which happened again in Game 5. Like, Carter Mazur is a dog, and he's so incredibly good. And I asked him again in the post-media scrum, I asked him, I was like, how does your style of play complement guys like Jonathan Berggren and Marco Kasper? And instead of saying how he makes them better, he just says they're really easy to play with. He super humble, doesn't take any of the credit, but it's like, Carter, come on. You're really helping, especially Berggren, right? Because Berggren's he's a shooter. He's a sniper. A guy like Mazur really helps. And to prop up a guy like Jonathan Berggren, the chemistry is so palpable between those two. So I've notable performer, absolutely Carter Mazur.
Yeah, no, great call. I think I know we got to get to a break here, but I think I'm going to cheat. And one of my other notable performers, it's not an individual, but I genuinely, like, you could feel the atmosphere of that arena through the stream. So that's just going to be the barn, the fan base, everything. That was absolutely incredible, and I wish I could have been there. That was unbelievable to watch through the stream, and I think that was, one of the biggest things I took away from this game was just how awesome the atmosphere looked, more than really anything else, to be honest.
Yeah, so I completely agree. We'll head to a quick break, and when we return, we'll wrap up a couple extra notable performers from the game, and then we'll get into the second game of the weekend, Game 5 of the series, though, in segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Let's do a couple more notable performers, mainly just to call out, L'Esperance gets that second power play goal, and I want to wrap that into just the special teams in general, which is an ongoing theme, right? 2 power play goals on a double minor. You get a goal in the first 2 minutes and then get a goal in the second 2-minute minor. You scored 4 goals in less than 4 minutes to then go from down 2-0 to up 4-0. Like, that's the power of special teams. That's the power of scoring on the power play. The notable performer in this game, one of the notable performers in that game, is the power play. And it's just an ongoing theme because scoring on the power play can win you hockey games. And I know in this instance, it just simply tied it, but it completely altered the momentum. They came right back down and scored right afterwards. Askarov got hurt and inevitably got pulled. Like, that momentum from that power play goal in the third period really propelled them. So, like, L'Esperance's the second goal that was scored by L'Esperance is like, yes, the power play was such a big deal in that game in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that unless you have any more, that transitions us into Game 5, where I think, if you don't mind, I'll kick us off here with a difference maker, and that is going to be special teams and just like penalties in general. Like, you were trying to claw back into this hockey game, and consistently we're in the box in the second half of the second period and most of the third period. Like, it's really hard to manage and navigate a comeback when you are consistently in the box, man. Like, and the penalty kill was great in this hockey game, right? It's not
fantastic.
Like the penalty kill was allowing, a ton. They were excellent, but there's a difference between not allowing goals and playing on your heels versus like being on the attack and giving yourself a chance to come back in the game. And then obviously, as we've mentioned a lot, the power play went right back to how it's looked pretty much the entire postseason, which was relatively non-existent on Sunday as well. So, we were talking about it off air before. The power play was legitimately successful in one game. And it was Friday. Like, Friday, they had the 2 goals, and that was huge, obviously. That's like kind of it. That's like the only time the power play has looked really solid in the most of the entire postseason for Grand Rapids. So that's was unfortunate, and it's unfortunate that was such a big reason for the loss. But again, credit to the penalty kill, fantastic. It's just, unless you're getting a shorty, like you're not, you know what I mean? It's really tough to claw your way back into the game when you're pretty much on the penalty kill for almost the entirety of the last 25 minutes of the hockey game.
Speaking of shorties, it's really hard to win a hockey game when you give up a shorthanded goal on one of your own power plays to one of the best scorers in LaRue. And I mean, like you said, we talked just a couple minutes ago about how important the power plays in Game 4 were to keeping the series alive, and then right back to the same crap as always in here in Game 5. Like we talk about all the penalties that Grand Rapids took. Milwaukee had 6 power plays, 2 of which in the third period were 5-on-3s for a time. Grand Rapids had 5 power plays of their own, and with the exception of 2, I believe, they were all garbage. That's a strong word, but I think it's an accurate word to describe the puck movement of those power plays. They could not even establish zone presence. And on the short-handed goal, and it drove me nuts because I've seen them do this before. And credit to Milwaukee's penalty kill as well, because part of this was how Milwaukee plays their penalty kill. They're very aggressive. They don't sit back and wait. They push you. And on that shorthanded goal, the very first power play of the game for Grand Rapids, it might have been the first or second power play of the game for Grand Rapids, they would get the puck in the corner, Milwaukee would press. So Grand Rapids player would then ring it around the boards to the next guy. Milwaukee would press, ring it around the boards to the next guy. Milwaukee would press, ring it around to the point. Well, now you're up to the point. You can't ring it around the boards anymore, so you try to force a pass to the middle that gets picked off. Boom, hits the breakaway pass. LaRue's gone, goal. Like, the power play and the special teams in general, like they got away with it when I say lesser Rockford team, that Rockford Ice Hawks team is very good. But Milwaukee was the 1 seed for a reason.
Milwaukee's maybe the best team in the AHL.
Right. Like them and Coachella, who are meeting in the Western Conference Final now, are like the 2 teams that are the hottest in the AHL. So, like, you could get away with that against Rockford, but not against Milwaukee. So they had to figure out how to get the power play going on a more consistent basis, and they couldn't. They had 4 power play goals in this series. 1 was an empty net goal at the end of the game, so it doesn't really even count. The second one was a power play goal when you were down at like 4-0, 3-0, and then to make it 3-1, it was like in Game 2 when they got blown out, right? So it's like, okay, big whoopee. And then Game 4, they finally broke through in a big moment, and you're like, okay, can they turn the corner now? And it's nope. Right back to not even being able to establish zone and get puck movement going.
Right.
Like, it is without a doubt the biggest difference maker in Game 5 and the playoffs as a whole as to why the Griffins are eliminated now. That being said, my difference maker in this, I mean, yours is number 1, and then number 2 right beneath that, Troy Groesnick, right? Comes in relief for Askarov. He starts the series. The Griffins chasing. They go back to Askarov. Askarov's great until he gets hurt. They have to go back for Troy Groesnick for Game 5, and he made 30 of 30 saves. They could not solve him because as much complaining as I'm doing about the special teams, at 5-on-5 through the first 40 minutes, especially the first 20 minutes especially, but as a whole, the first 40 minutes, the Griffins dominated 5-on-5 play, had a plethora of chances. In fact, let me look at my notes. I even wrote down like opportunities that every single team had. Soderblom came in, shot the puck high. Then there was a 3-on-1 with Soderblom, Luff, and one other player. Luff shot it off a stick. You have Zach Aston-Reese walks in after he picks a pocket all alone, and Groesnick makes a huge save. Mazerin all alone. Groesnick makes a huge save. I mean, that just continued to be the ongoing theme. Either Groesnick would make a huge save, or the Griffins would almost play themselves out of a goal. And this is another issue I was having. This is where it's just like the Red Wings. I know I'm kind of getting into a rant here, but they would continually make that one extra pass when they do have a good scoring opportunity right in front of them. That was a big issue I had with Berggren in Game 3, and then in Game 4 he decided to start shooting the puck, and he scored goals. So like sometimes you take advantage, but overall, I mean, Troy Groesnick was the other difference maker. To just wrap back up and finish my monologue before I go off in the super deep end.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a pretty fair and easy person to point to when you put up a shutout in an elimination game, right. A winner take all, not even just like only one. I mean, Game 5 in a 5-gamer. That's very impressive. So.
Right. So we're going to head to another quick break when we return. I got just a couple more, like just little tidbits for notable performers, and we'll get into our biggest takeaways from the playoffs. So stay tuned to that in segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. As far as notable performers go, shout out again, Carter Mazur. I thought Marco Kasper was very good as well. Both of those guys just absolutely stellar. And honestly, I feel like that almost takes me into our biggest takeaways from the series, from the playoffs in general. And that is that I honest to God, especially Carter Mazur. Carter Mazur number one, I think is going to be a Red Wing next year. Everything that I saw from him is NHL material.
Yeah, I think the way you worded it off air before we hopped on was really like brilliantly put in the angle for this conversation, which was what did we learn, right? Not even necessarily biggest takeaways, just what did we learn? Because you and I, obviously our priority during the regular season is the Red Wings, and a lot of those games overlap and whatnot. So this is the first time we have gotten a real opportunity to break down and dissect and analyze and just flat out watch the Griffins on a consistent basis, at least. And I think that if you're simply just asking what did we learn this postseason run, I completely agree with you. I think one of the things we learned is that Carter Mazur at worst is going to be in the conversation for a bottom 6 role on this hockey team, the Red Wings, that is, the NHL team, in the fall, and at best is going to be in the bottom 6 on opening night this fall. And the thing, and I keep going back to it, but it's such a great point that Boltman made was he was on, which is, that's probably his player profile anyway, and that's probably his ceiling anyway, bottom 6, that is. So you don't need to like shelter minutes or like cater minutes to him and go, oh, like he would get more minutes down in, Grand Rapids, so we can't bring him up right now. Like, no, that's like the kind of player he is. Like, you can just put him in there and see what happens. And if he earns, more playing time, then great. Obviously he earns that and he provides it. But at the start, you don't need to guarantee, a big pool of minutes for him. I think he is incredible, and I think that he is going to be, when we talk about dogs on the team, I think that Carter Mazur is going to be a candidate to be one of the bigger dogs on this team next year. This is the kind of hockey he plays, man.
He had 8 points in the 9 games with the Grand Rapids Griffins. He was a point per game up until, again, that final shutout where nobody got any points, right? Like, he is just so well balanced. Like, he's got a healthy amount of skill. He's not slow. He's got decent agility. He thrives in the corner. He thrives at going to the net. Like, he brings that type of grit that you need in a bottom 6 role. And us saying, again, it goes back to the Berggren conversation. Us saying Mazur is a bottom 6 player is not an insult or an indictment, right?
Yeah, not at all.
That you need bottom 6 players, and Carter Mazur, and I mean, you could even argue, if you want to say his ceiling is second line, sure, why not? I'm not going to split hairs over it, right? Not you individual, Scotty, but I'm talking to the people right now.
Yeah, no, well, that's why I said, like, if he earns more, then he earns more.
Yeah.
But, like, the fact of the matter is you can carve out, 12 minutes a night for him and 12 to 15 minutes a night and feel really good about that next season.
This is a compliment.
Right, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
This is a guy who, in his first full season of professional hockey, looks ready to take this step into the NHL because his game is going to translate so well. He's going to go on the bottom 6, and he's going to help make those bottom 6 lines more productive because he's going to win those battles. And if those third and fourth lines start winning battles and start producing, he's going to get looks at the second line.
Right.
And we're going to find out how high that ceiling truly is. But at a minimum, in my eyes, like I'm going out on a limb right now and saying Carter Mazur is making the team next year.
Love it.
He looks like an NHL player to me, more so because he is so well-rounded. Like, we know Jonathan Berggren, right? Going back to that conversation again. We know Jonathan Berggren can score. What's the thing that's holding him out of the NHL right now? It's the other side of the ice. So, like, it's just that Mazur's game translates so readily to the NHL because of the style he plays. His ceiling might be different than a guy like Berggren. It might not be, but it might be because of that style of game. But, like, he just looks like a guy who's going to come to the NHL and immediately slide in and look comfortable just because of the way he plays. And that being said, moving on to the other guy I have on here, Marco Kasper, right? He had he kind of flew under the radar, I feel. He had 7 points in 9 games. He retroactively got credited with a goal in game 4 that they initially gave to Berggren that Kasper had tipped. But Marco Kasper, while not as, 7 points in 9 games is still really good, but he didn't like stand out outside of that 3-point night in game 1 where he carried the team to victory. He didn't stand out on the score sheet as much as a guy like Gametime, Berggren or Austin Czarnik did. But I felt like every single shift he was out there, he was impactful. So while I don't think he's as slam dunk in my eyes as Carter Mazur is to make the team, I think Marco Kasper has a pretty healthy shot as well.
Yeah, no, well, and I think Kasper's going to be one that is going to be heavily influenced by what they do in free agency. You know what I mean? Like if they really bolster up depth up the middle, I guess specifically, if they find a way, trade, free agency, whatever, to get kind of a more bona fide 2C in here, then maybe that keeps Kasper on the outside, at least at the start of the season. Or, we've had the conversations about putting him on the wing and seeing what happens too. I think that he's just going to be influenced by that as well. But I do think, again, when it comes to like what we learned, I think we learned that Marco Kasper has very quickly throughout the course of the season become at worst fringe between the AHL and the NHL, right? And that's like on the low end. At best, he is, to your point, probably getting a look in the fall. So I think right now I would still lean like outside just because, I'm planning for moves to happen over the summer. But in terms of how he looked this postseason, it certainly is an indictment on that, man. He was really, really solid. And I do think that is, again, him and Mazur both are two of the biggest takeaways from this entire postseason, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Other thing, Edvinsson, right? Like how huge is he in the bottom 6? He played
important. How night and day was it when he was on the ice versus when he was off the ice? It was, or in the lineup, just period, versus not in the lineup was staggering.
He plays 55 minutes of game 4, leaves in the last 5 minutes or so with a lower body injury, does not play in game 5. And the Griffins played good in game 5, but like you always feel when his presence isn't back there. And also they lost Šimek as well, who Griffins acquired via the trade for Klim Kostin. He was the captain, I believe, of the Barracuda, another veteran presence. They lost 2 big defensemen, but like you can really feel another big takeaway is like the importance of Edvinsson on the back end, and just again kind of proving like he's ready for the next step, because when he's out there, it's like a calming presence to the rest of the team. Sure. Sebastian Cossa as well. We kind of talked a little bit about that, right? I think he gets an NHL debut at some point next season, but I think he's still 1 year away from full-time NHL. And I don't mean that to be like, because he played bad. He played great in the postseason, but it's just goalies take a little bit longer. And I think that 1 more year in Grand Rapids is really going to benefit him to becoming a full-time NHL goaltender, because it's the same conversation we have, right, with some of these other NHL prospects. Different goals for different players. Like you're not calling up Simon Edvinsson or Marco Kasper unless they're ready to eat big minutes at the NHL level. On the other hand, a guy like Carter Mazur, who's projected to be like a bottom 6 player, you're not really worried too much about playing time if he's going to probably get like 13, well, not 13, that's a little on the low side, but like 15, 16 minutes a night on a given night, right? Playing bottom 6. So that's the case here with Cossa as well. If you're not going to give him the starter's net or give him at least a 1A, 1B situation in Detroit, you don't call him up yet. And that's why I say 1 more year. Give him that 1 more year to season in Grand Rapids. But he's a lot closer. This postseason and this season in general really showed his growth as a goaltender. He's a lot closer now than I thought he was at the beginning of the season. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And he's a guy, that we've just talked about so much since being drafted, really. But just in general, man, like everybody has their eyes on him. Everyone's waiting for him. We've talked so much about, my opinion of the bringing in a goalie this summer and all of that. I think, you have to separate
development timeline versus like what the NHL team needs right now sometimes, right? The NHL team you could really use like Kosa's debut this fall, but you're not just going to rush him just for that reason. I really do think that he was good. He really did look good. And I think that that's kind of my, I don't know, one of my bigger takeaways from the postseason was how consistent he looked. And I think there's one more gear that he can kind of tap into at the AHL level. And then I think we'll see him in Detroit next season. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final thing that I learned from this postseason is that the Red Wings have a very big problem on their hand, and it is a great one to have. And that's the fact that they have a lot of young talent that is right on the cusp of pushing for NHL jobs. And so they're going to have to figure out what the hell they're doing with their roster this offseason, because you have guys, Edvinsson on their roster, full-time NHLer, no debate. Carter Mazur, I think, is I would say 90% sure that he's on the NHL roster next year. Berggren, Albert Johansson, pretty confident, right? Like, if they're going to be in the NHL, if it's not with the Detroit Red Wings, it'll be with somebody else.
No waivers.
Because they can't go through waivers, because if you put them on through waivers, they're going to get picked up. You have Marco Kasper, who looks really good as well, and people have even whispered, we only saw 2 games of Danielson here in this series, and he looked just okay. Obviously, tough situation to come into. I'm not going to take away too much from his performances.
Yeah.
But like, we've had people talk about Danielson as being like a shadow candidate, a dark horse candidate to make the team coming into training camp. So like, you have 5 to 6 players who could really make decisions tough for Lalonde and Yzerman. And then whatever you make in their offseason, like, the Red Wings have the opportunity here to get better from within this season. And that's a really good thing to have, considering the cap is going to be a real thing after you re-sign Seider and Raymond. So this is a fantastic problem the Detroit Red Wings find themselves in.
You know what I love?
Me?
Yes. Without a shadow of a doubt, that is correct. You know what else I love?
I love you too.
I love organizational depth, and I love NHL roster depth so much. You know, like, we talk so much about, we have for this entire rebuild, right? About just like, this team has the ability at some point to be really deep, and every year they're deeper than the last, and every year they're better because of it. This is a year where you could finally see kind of like the merging of free agent and like offseason acquisitions and like call-ups, and you could have a pretty darn deep roster on your hands, which would be really exciting.
And you know what? That's why I think that you might see a little bit of a quieter offseason from Steve Yzerman. You might see a big splash acquisition, but you're not going to see 11 guys signed like you did last year. I really think this might be a slightly quieter offseason, just a few guys acquired through free agency and trade. But these young guys, man, they look ready to me. A lot of them look ready to me. And that's exciting. I'm really excited to see a younger Detroit Red Wings team next year as they try again to make another step forward. So,
absolutely,
cross our fingers that happens and it doesn't lead to a step back instead. But that's where Yzerman is. That's his job, right? To figure that balance out. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts, bro?
I don't think so, man. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.